Yo, what's good, YouTube? Today I want to go over with the release of Firefly, obviously the path of destruction and every character in it, because obviously with Firefly, like we thought with Acheron, well, I thought, and just like everyone else, Acheron would be like the last character to like break the game. But obviously with the release of Firefly, she's better than Acheron somehow, some way, and she breaks the game, right? So destruction path is certain characters getting moved down, certain characters getting moved up because of break, and certain characters getting moved down because just the release of Firefly is just insane. So as you see, I have the tier list. I put the path to destruction characters all here, and then you can have the tiers. Why is this a character? I mean, basically, why the fuck does this character exist? Why is this character as broken as they are? Basically Firefly, right? And then you have pretty good, which pretty good is like characters that are like just really good basically, and then you can use them, you can beat the game. They're basically meta if you pull them, and they're really good for everything, and you can just beat everything in the game with them. And then next you have good tier, which obviously good tier characters that are just fine. Like you get them, they're fine, they're cool, they're good, they do what they need to do, and that's really it. There's nothing really special about them like the rest of the characters above them. Then you have mid-tier. This is for the characters that are just not very good, that you can use them and you could probably do stuff with them, but they're not like insanely good to use, and I wouldn't really recommend or you should care about them at all, to be honest, unless you obviously like them. And then you have in the dirt, which these are the characters that will never be revived and are just complete garbage. All right, these characters suck. You should not pull them, because if you do, I mean, you're just wasting your time. So yeah, I guess we can start with Arlan. I did put him here on purpose because he is the first character that just, I mean, this is arguably, you know what, I'll move these two here, just get it out the way. I mean, these are arguably the two worst characters in the game. Like, I'll talk about Arlan first. I mean, he basically does what Blade does, but just way worse. He doesn't heal himself, even though he consumes his own HP to do damage. He just doesn't heal himself, which is fucking ridiculous. So on top of just doing not very good amount of damage on, and then also just basically killing himself while not doing good damage, it's just such a waste of time. Like, even if you pair him with a good healer, since his damage isn't big, it's just like there's legit no point. It's just a lose-lose situation with everything in his kit. It's just not good at all, which does suck because his animations are actually really good in my opinion, and some of the best in the game, but it is what it is. Then you obviously have Path to Destruction Trailblazer, which I forgot this even existed. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, it's so bad also. Like, this is just another character that cannot be revived. It isn't like a break team where you can come off a break support that buffs them and gives them more damage. Like, there's just no way that these two can be revived. That means they just don't do damage. They just don't do anything. There's no character that can come out and save them because they don't do like a specific type of thing. They just do regular damage and it just does nothing. So especially when it comes to like MC, you can build Harmony MC. So it's just like what's really the point, right? You just have you have the best in slot break support right there. It's like, so there's really no point to use physical MC in my opinion. And if you don't want to use Harmony MC, you have Fire Trailblazer, which even then it isn't insane, but it is still pretty better option than obviously physical MC. But overall, I'd say out of all these characters, these are probably the only two that are on this list right here on the bottom in the dirt. I mean, you should not waste your time with them. They're garbage basically. Next, move on. Blade, good. He isn't pretty good. He doesn't crack that. I said at one point, obviously in the beginning of the game, he was pretty good. He was insane. But the more characters are released and the way it's looking, more characters coming down the line, he's just there, right? Like, you get him, he's really good, right? It's just a lot of things with him. It's just like, he does everything. I told this before. He's like probably one of the most universal like DPS in the game, outside of like Acheron or Firefly. We don't fucking talk about those two, okay? Outside of those two, he really he does follow up attack. He does AoE damage. He does single target damage. He just does regular damage. He does he consumes his own HP. Like, he has so many things in his kit that he does, and he scales off of so many things that's like, he's just universal. You can put him fucking anything, he can do anywhere, he can do whatever, right? It's just so good. He's just good at what he does basically. One thing with Blade is if you run him with like dual DPS, like you run him and Jingliu together, it's honestly really good. But the thing is like, you can't really run him with that many Harmony units since he scales off of HP, and there's like no Harmony unit that just buffs his HP basically. So it's not really, he doesn't like, until that character comes out, maybe he'll go in pretty good once that character comes out, but it just really is not looking like that. I mean, he can self-sustain. That's really good. Another thing is his characters are mostly limited. Like, say if you're gonna run dual DPS, him and Jingliu, and then just you need to run off a tank / healer to make sure that he sustains himself. Even though he can sustain himself, he still cannot fully sustain himself, where he just doesn't die fully basically. It's just but overall, if you pull him, he's really good. And you, like I said, you can clear anything in the game with him. He does everything basically. He does really good amount of damage. And when in the future, when a character that comes out that can buff him better, he will maybe go in pretty good tier, but we have to wait until see how. Like if a Rohan May character to come out that basically did everything that Rohan May does, but just basically buff like HP and stuff like Blade, it would be insane. He would probably go up here, right? But for now, he's here until that character comes out. Next is Misha. You could put him in there, but I'd say mid. Like Misha's a character that's fine. Like for single target, he actually does a pretty insane amount of damage, to be honest. It isn't like game breaking, but it's a lot of damage because he does like bounces. So when it's just one boss, all of his bounces go on the boss, kind of like Osto for break, but like just damage. And it's actually a good amount, but it just also isn't worth it because everything else is pretty bad. Like his AoE is horrible because his bouncer just is so inconsistent, and it really isn't good. Like if you look into his kit, you'd think he'd be a perfect character for like pure fiction, but in reality he just sucks actually in pure fiction, like really bad. And like outside of MOC, if it's only one boss, which at this point it never is, so once again he isn't very good. The one thing is he does scale very well with Eidolon, so maybe if you get him E6 and you want to build him, then sure, but even then he's not very good and not very compelling to build or use basically. Next you have Clara. Clara's good. I mean, this is once again just another Blade. Like these two, like Clara is just, she does follow-up attack, she does AoE, she does single target, she does it all. She's just like really good. But also her damage also just it bounces. Like you can do a really high damage this time and then just a low damage this time. I can't really give my full opinions on her because since the beginning of the game, I've had C1 or C2 Clara, because after the first banner, I legit lost to 50-50, and then I also got her on the standard banner. So I immediately had C1, and then I think the next update, I got C2, and then like, obviously like, I think the last update, I got C3. So I'm basically on a C3 Clara. So I can't really talk much about her because mine obviously does an insane amount of damage because she's almost C4. But she, overall at C0 though, from what I've seen, she is really good. She does an insane amount of damage, even though, like I said, it does fluctuate. For the most part, her main part of damage is really good. Also, her damage isn't in her turn because obviously it's follow-up attack. So because of that, that main damage that she does, it just helps so much easier to put like buffs and set up buffs for her since the attacks are not in her turn and they're basically Safarog. Another thing is with her, you can build her tanky if you want. I obviously don't recommend it, but she is very durable. I know some people were in the beginning of the game were like testing out tank Clara and see how that works, and honestly it wasn't bad, especially like when Swarm first came out. People were testing it out to see if you could solo it with her, because with her Lycone obviously being able to heal herself and of how tanky she is, it was honestly really good at how she did. Okay, so I'm basically gonna move her here because I just realized I want to talk about this first, because obviously these two together are kind of like intertwined when it comes to like the DPS section. Because obviously Imbibiter Lunae, I'll talk about him first and then go after Jingliu first or afterwards. Imbibiter Lunae was just like, when he released, it just broke the game. It was just like, what the fuck is this character? Because like the damage before that, like we didn't really have insane amount of damage. We had like Kafka, but at that time Kafka didn't really have her main dot team like fully built yet. Rohan May or Black Swan weren't released. Woho wasn't released. So she was doing very little damage to the point where we're talking about, is Kafka just garbage? Right? The other team that we had, Blade, etc., there wasn't really much else going on. So when Imbibiter Lunae released, we're like, oh my god, this character breaks the game. He is broken. Basically how we talk about Akron and Firefly now is basically how we talked about this character. Like this character was insane. The one thing was obviously his skill points, like his animations and his skill point manipulations was like the coolest thing in my opinion, even though his design itself in my opinion is garbage. I pulled from at that time because I was like, this is sick as fuck, right? And I was like, this is a character that's only going to get better over time, which he did with the release of Sparkle, right? But back then, he was still broken. He was still insane. We're like, they're never going to release another character like this, which is why I'm going to go over Jingliu in a second, or that's why I put her afterwards. But basically, that was it, right? And then, like I said, later on, now we got Sparkle. And honestly, he can still get more buffs over time in the future with a new relic set that maybe somehow buffs skill point manipulation, or like a synergy with him, like a sustainer getting released that like gives him more skill points or something like that. Because like with the release of Firefly, or not Firefly, with the release of Sparkle, she basically gives him enough skill points to be able to run him with Fu Xuan, which is best in slot sustainer, because she gives him crit synergy and he needs crit. So basically it works out. But before obviously Sparkle, that's why without Sparkle he went completely down. He wasn't nowhere near as powerful as he is now. So the thing is like, if you don't have his right team, his DPS isn't going to be as insane as it can be. Like I said, without Sparkle, Tingyun, and Fu Xuan maybe, but Sparkle and Tingyun mostly. If you don't have those two, his damage output really isn't as sane as it could be, but it's just still pretty good. And basically, most people are going to pull Tingyun or have Tingyun because she's a 4-star. Everyone should get her. She's the best slot 4-star in the game. And then also you have Sparkle, which Sparkle is probably 4th best Harmony unit, maybe 3rd. So yeah, it's just a really easy team to pull for characters that are really good in the game. So, which leads me to my next point, Jingliu, right? We were like, Imbibiter Lunae, when he released, this character's broken. But then legit, like, I think a patch later, Jingliu came out, and I was like, okay, well, fuck, well, this is the direction. This is a point where we're like, this is the direction we're going, okay? It was insane. We're like, no, they're never going to release another character that's broken as Imbibiter Lunae. It's just never going to happen. We have our DPS units, it is what it is. Then Jingliu released, and it was like, it was just okay. It was fucking insane because obviously, like, her best in slot to this day, Bronya. Yeah, back then we had Bronya, so it was kind of like with how we had with Silly. It was basically kind of that with Jingliu, but like it was different because like with Jingliu, you kind of had to speed tune her team. This was like the first team, in my opinion, that I had to speed tune and make sure everything was correct. I had to make sure my Pela goes right before my Jingliu. I had to make sure my Bronya goes right after my Jingliu, so I can do everything perfectly to get the mode perfectly. It was just insane, and her damage was just on a different level, which, don't get me wrong, obviously Ruan Mei ended up releasing, which took her team to another world once again, because you get rid of Pela, who's really good, but Ruan Mei just broken as fuck, so it's just completely different. But then it's like Sparkle released, so that's when they're making the Imbibiter Lunae team go so insane, because instead of just Sparkle, now you have also Fu Xuan that you can put on that team. So it made that team also go to another world, but just slightly above Jingliu's team. But to be honest, we're at the point where it's like, with the release of Firefly and Acheron, it doesn't fucking matter. They're both around the same tier. Whichever team you want to pull and go around, they're both really good. Ruan Mei's OP. Bronya, good. Jingliu, broken. Imbibiter Lunae, broken. Sparkle, broken. And then Tingyun, broken. So both teams have a bunch of characters on their teams that are just both really good and worth pulling for. So it's just like which team you want to build, basically. They're both OP. They're both broken, basically. That's the end of it. Next is Hook. This is a character that I mean, first off, she really isn't a destruction character. Like, she does so much more single target and like a little sprinkle of AoE. Like, that's really it. Like one little thing of AoE. And like her damage just isn't very good. I will say this. It's not as bad as these two, so I will put her in mid, but she's also just not very good. Like, her damage for single target, just like Misha, that's why they're in the same tier, can also go to a fairly good amount. She does a fairly good amount of single target damage. Once again, not insane, but she is good. But her AoE, once again, don't really understand why she's marked as a, she's more of like a hunt character than a destruction character, because she does just so basically single target damage, not AoE. And then her main damage is mostly relying like on burn. So she's a character that can maybe get buffed in the future if there's like a burn buffer, that like a support or whatever, but I don't really think that's ever going to happen. So, I mean, I just don't see it. So this is a character that I really don't see going anywhere. Like, even if a character were to come out, I don't see her getting buffed. So, especially since she relies on burn, there's just so many other fire characters that you can build, like Knife, and that's another 4-star that's easy to get, that you can just build around and just does way more damage than her. That's just better. So, next is Xueyi. Xueyi I'd probably put here. I like, before obviously Harmony MC released, I wouldn't say I'd put her down here because she was still fairly decent, but she also was on the same tier as D. I'd probably give her like her own tier, like right in the middle, kind of like a pretty one with like the 0.5 and the 1. I'd probably put her like right in that middle. So she's like, also with the release of Harmony MC and Break Team becoming meta, she's become really, really good now. The thing is like, before Acheron or Firefly, with her E4 and ultimate, she was the first character to like ignore the enemy's toughness or whatever break. And so basically with her ultimate, with her E4, she would pop it and she would basically just ignore it, and she would do quantum break to the enemy. So that was cool. But obviously back then break wasn't meta, so it didn't really matter. She's a character with her Eidolon, she scales insanely well. She just becomes better and better and becomes like a basic completely new character at E6, to be honest. And the thing is another reason she goes up higher than she was before is because she wasn't a character that did enough that you'd want to invest in an entire team just to build around her, since she was the only break character in the game basically. it just wasn't worth it to invest into two other characters to just invest into one character. It just was way too much to go into. So now with the release of Firefly, obviously you investing so much into Break just for the Break meta now, she obviously becomes so much better because now you can just build her and then boom, you have her full team already ready to go because of Firefly. So overall, she's good. She's just like Firefly. Firefly were to get a buff because of some type of thing they were added to the game, she gets a buff. They were to add like a nerf to some of the enemies to the game, that she would get a nerf. Basically, she's Break. She does exactly with that. So next, to last but not least, I guess, Firefly. I mean, fucking stupid character. I mean, pull the character, get her, build the Break team. It's broken. It breaks the game. She does 1 billion damage. It's not even fair. If you like meta and you're a meta whore, go ahead, man. I did it. Everyone did it. Why? Because she's fucking broken. Okay. Also, because she's Firefly. She's arguably the second best character in the story. Second to Sparkle, of course, because Sparkle's just a better character, but she's still second best. You know what I'm saying?